Don't you love getting messages? Come on, don't you love it when someone sends you a message? You hear a little sound on your phone and you think, oh my goodness, it's a text message. I've got to answer it right now. Or you're on your computer and you're on Facebook and you see someone's left you a message. Or you're on live chat and you've just got to see what your friends are saying. Come on, we love to get messages. Even getting a good old letter in snail mail can be a whole lot of fun. Now, sometimes the messages you get are messages you really want to get. Fellas, there's a real letter for you in your letterbox. It's sort of one of those greeting card sized letters, and the envelope is sort of pinky purple. And your name has been written in a beautiful handwriting where the I's are dotted with little flowers and petals. And as you take it out of the letterbox, you can just smell the perfume that is in the envelope. And there is a profound physiological change going on within you. Because this is a message you want to get. Every part of your body is paying attention. But you know, sometimes there's messages you don't want to get. You know the day when the report card comes out? You might be thinking, I don't want that message. There comes a day when the HSC results come out. Where are the people just starting year 12? Just wave at us. Where are you? Okay. Are you hanging for that day when the HSC results come out, when the university placements come out? That can be a scary message. Somebody comes to your classroom with a message, and the message is, the principal wants to see you in his room. And you're thinking, I don't think it's a commendation for being student of the year. There can be some messages which are terrifying. But tonight we're going to be looking at a message from the Almighty God. And we're going to be looking at a crazy book in the Bible. It's called the Book of Revelation. And I want to suggest to you right up front that the Book of Revelation is a message from God that actually answers the three key questions that so many of us have. Can I suggest to you 3 questions you would love to have the answers to in your life? Question number one, who's winning? You know, sometimes you just want to flick the cricket on the TV and just see how the score is going. You're looking for the little box up in the corner that just tells you what the score is. You're not looking at it because you want to see the action. I mean, it is Test cricket, so, you know, not a whole lot of action going on there. You just want to know who's winning. You just want to know whether Australia is in an unbeatable position. You just want to know, have we got this one sewn up? We love to know who's winning. And I want to suggest to you the book of Revelation is going to tell you who's winning. Who's winning? The battle between God and Satan. Who's winning? The battle that you might be facing as a Christian. You said you'd be a Christian and then you've had all these failures. All these times you let God down. All the times you stuffed up and got things wrong. I want to suggest to you, you're going to discover this week who's winning. There's the first big question that I think Revelation will answer for you. Here's the second question. Have I joined the right group? Have I joined the right group? Now, people love grouping together. You've grouped together at a place called ImpaKCt, and right now, some of you are thinking, I don't know whether I should have come. Some of you are sitting there right now thinking, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into? You're looking around the room and you're thinking, I don't know many of these people and they look pretty weird. Have I actually joined the right group? Because you know human beings love to group together. I keep seeing stacks of you grouped together in a little thing called Facebook. Now, I was just checking this. You know how many users of Facebook there are at the moment? It has over 320 million people who belong to that group. Now, if you're watching this on the DVD, by the time you see this, there's probably stacks more. 320 million. That means if Facebook was a country, it would be the third most populated country in the world. And that's a group that everyone wants to belong to. But that's not enough, is it? Once you're on Facebook, have you noticed, people start joining all these other little groups. And you keep sending me messages inviting me to join your groups. And I really love it when you do that. And so I keep noticing how all my friends here at Crossfire, I keep seeing on my newsfeed which groups that you have joined. Because the groups that you join tell us a lot about who you are. The groups that you join tell us who you are. Now, a name I keep seeing in my newsfeed when somebody joins a group is my good friend, Ben Tranter. Where's Ben? Where's Benny hiding? Just point at him. Okay, there's Ben. Great friend of mine, Ben Tranter. He belongs to 72 different groups. And I checked this with Ben before I got up here. It is correct. Now, I thought it might be interesting to see what groups he has joined. Does that make sense? Every group you join tells us something about you, and sometimes you've got to ask the question, have I joined the right group? Okay, well, some of Ben's groups make a lot of sense, I think. For example, he has joined the group which petitioned to build an adult-sized McDonald's playground. Yeah? Come on. Yeah. That is a cause worth living and dying for. Here's another one of Ben's group, and it makes sense. See if you agree. During the holidays, I forget what day it is. That's a good group, yeah? Another one of Benny's groups, $1.20 for Freddo frogs is unbloody Australian. Apologies to other cultures watching on the DVD. Bloody is a word that we just use here a lot. Now, of course, Ben is very proud of his school. Did you know that he belongs to this group? Chapman House, William Clark College. Now, there's a group you'd want to join, isn't it? Although Ben, this one worried me. Ben belongs to, every time you see Year 7s at lunch, you want to throw a chair at them. I'm starting to worry. Here are some more groups Mr. Tranter belongs to. Now, you might belong to these as well. Yes, I live in Australia, and yes, I do ride a kangaroo to school. To the Americans watching, we really do. Oh, Ben, I worried about this one, Ben. Making the tiny teddies suffer as much as possible before you eat them. Oh, we got Australia Day coming up. This one hit my nationalistic fervour. Aussies, this is the group. Aussies can reach 2 million before any other nationality. It's got 550 members. But Ben, here are the ones that started to worry me. Because the group you joined tells us something about yourself. Ben joined this group. If I step on a leaf that looks crunchy and it isn't crunchy, I get sad. He also joined this group. If zombies attack, meet us at Bunnings Warehouse. Get the chainsaw out, you know. Ben joined this group. When I realised the word bed looks like a bed, my mind was blown. Ben, can I suggest to you, your mind gets blown too easily. And this last one, I think it's a worry. He joined this group. Life is better without pants. Here's a new group that anyone can join. It's called, on Facebook, I have joined so many groups, they start to tell my life story. You see, any group you join, you've got to think, am I actually in the right group? If you've joined the group called Christians, you've got to ask that question sometimes. Because maybe around your school, Christians don't get a good PR. Maybe they get made fun of sometimes. Maybe you look at the non-Christians and think, well, they appear to be enjoying life a little bit better. And the book of Revelation is going to tell you whether you've actually joined the right group. That's the second big question I think you'll discover an answer to. Here's a third question. What happens next? Imagine you got an email every day that told you what was going to happen for the rest of the day. Imagine you knew the winning lotto numbers before you bought the ticket. Imagine you knew what questions would be on the exam paper before you started your study. If there's a girl or a guy that you're chatting up, wouldn't it be good to know which ones would eventually go out with you so you wouldn't waste your time on all the others that don't? Now seriously, you would love to know what is happening next. Imagine knowing the sort of person that you're going to be in 5 years' time. Imagine knowing whether you're still going to be a Christian in 5 years' time. Imagine knowing if you're still going to be a Christian at the end of this year. You see, that's the sort of question we need to know. What happens next? And when we look at the book of Revelation, we're going to see that God wants to answer that question and tell us what's happening next. They're the three big questions that you're going to get answers from God. Number one, who's winning? Number two, have I joined the right group? And number three, what happens next? Now, you need to know a few things about the book of Revelation. It's the last book in the Bible, and my suspicion is God put it there so you'd read the other 65 books first before you got to it. Because it can be a little difficult to understand every now and again. And you've got to imagine that the last of Jesus' apostles is still alive. The Apostle John is an old man. We're talking around about 90 AD, so it's around 60 years after Jesus was put on a cross. And as an old man, God shows him what's happening behind the scenes, because you've got to understand what was going on in those days. By the time we get to about 90, 100 AD, the Roman Empire is starting to flourish as the world's superpower. They have conquered just about the then known world. They have invaded nearly every country and enforced their rule. They'd certainly been occupying Israel for many hundred years. And the Christians weren't exactly very popular, because the Roman emperor, wanting to make himself look pretty special, had worked out that he was really God. And he wanted everybody, whatever their religion was, to worship him, the emperor, as God. And guess what? The Christians refuse. The Christian says, yes, we'll honour you as the emperor. Yes, we'll obey the law of the land. Yes, we will respect you. But Jesus is Lord, and we will not worship the emperor as Lord. And so the Roman government of the day had become very savage in attacking Christians and humiliating them and wiping them out. And you see, the Christians were looking around, seeing their friends being killed, seeing their friends being tortured, and they genuinely wondered who was winning, because it looked like evil was winning. They genuinely were wondering, were they in the right group? Because it looked like they were about to be crushed. And they genuinely wanted to know what was going to happen next. Now, you've got to understand what life was like. When people went out to watch the wrestling, it wasn't like world wrestling entertainment on TV. There wasn't, you know, the big hulky heroes with the theme music and the flashing lights and the carefully choreographed and scripted stories. That wasn't what the wrestling was like. When you went to the wrestling around 90, 100 AD, here's what it looked like. In one corner were the Christians, and in the other corner there were hungry lions. And they would release the lions who they had starved and the Christians into the arena at the same time, and the crowd watched the lions tear Christians limb from limb. That's the world that the book of Revelation is written to. They would take Christians and bind them up with animal skins so they couldn't move their arms or the legs. They would throw them in the surf to see whether they would drown first or whether the sharks would get them first. That was the beachside entertainment of the day. They used to have large millstones, huge circular boulders, which used to be pushed around by oxen, they sometimes driven by water, but as this huge wheel would go around, it would crush the corn. It would mill the corn. And what they would love to do is just to throw a Christian or two in front of this giant boulder as it went along to see Christians being crushed. When the emperor had his garden parties at night, he wanted to light up his garden so his guests could enjoy the party. So he would get Christians and tie them to poles around his palatial gardens. He would cover them with oil and he would set fire to them. And that would provide the light so that people could enjoy the party. Are you getting the idea that the Christians there were having a really tough time? And it genuinely looked like evil was winning. It really looked like they were on the losing side. And John, the Apostle John, who had stood for Jesus, had been banished to the island of Patmos, never to have contact with a human being again. The emperor wanted him to be isolated so that he could not infect anybody else with this message of Jesus. And on this barren island of Patmos, God speaks to John in a powerful way and reveals to him what is now written down in the book of Revelation. So you've got to understand, this book, even though it may look a little strange, it's written to a persecuted, frightened little group of Christians to let them know what was really going on. And God says to John, write it down so that Christians in the 21st century can be comforted. So that Christians in the 21st century will also know who's winning. That Christians in the 21st century will know, have I joined the right group? And this book is written to us from God to let us know who's winning. It's written to let us know that we've joined the right group. And it's written to us to let us know what happens next. Now, who here has actually had a look at the book of Revelation, tried to read it at some stage? Just wave your hand around, okay? It's pretty bizarre. Is that a fair way of saying it? There's like really strange pictures. There's dragons with 10 horns. There's women. There's beasts. There's... Could I say that again? There's men and women and there's strange things here. But it's really bizarre pictures there. And you're looking at it, you're thinking, oh my, what on earth does this mean? Now, it's not a little coded message. It wasn't given out to God's people like, you know, doing Mr. Wisdom's Whopper crossword. It wasn't there to give them something to do on the train as they went to work. The first people who read this knew exactly what it said, because it's written in a style that they all recognised. Now, you can forget this word as soon as I say it, but it's called apocalyptic literature. It's a style of writing that the Jewish people were very familiar with throughout their history. And because most of the Christians had come out of the Jewish community, the Christians understood what apocalyptic literature was like. They could understand it. But here's the clue. The Romans had no idea what it meant. They didn't understand apocalyptic literature. So they're writing in this bizarre way with these extravagant pictures and these grotesque scenes and this huge imagery. And all the Christians know exactly what it means. And the Roman soldiers who happen to come across it, they look at it and they've got no idea what it means. It's like, let's imagine the teenagers of Crossfire wanted to write a chronicle about what life was really like in your home. You're going to reveal all the secrets that happen in your family, but you couldn't never let your parents find it. And even if they did find it, you want to write it in a way that they couldn't understand it. So, how would you do that? How could you write something that every teenager would understand, but your parents would have no idea what it meant? You would write it in SMS language. You would write it in text speak. Because you always use it for your little SMSs, and your parents are looking at it thinking, I got no idea what that means. I showed this to a bunch of people who are your parents' age, and they had no... Someone sent me this email. If God had texted the 10 Commandments, what would they look like? Now, I showed this to a group of people. Number 7's the one about adultery, just in case you're wondering. I showed this to people your parents' age, and they just looked at it and they had no idea what it said. I then let them know it was the 10 Commandments. Okay, enough of all that. Does that make sense? This book was understood by the Christians who read it, but the Romans who saw it had no idea. Can we write down some things to help us understand this? So you will have your little handy-dandy campers book there somewhere. Looks something like this. And just to make life hard for you, there's no page numbers. So we're about the 3rd page. So go sort of 1, 2, and there's a page looking like this. The first line says, what's it about? So take that out with your Bible, pen in your hand. I want you to write a couple of things down, because this will really help you understand it. Can I suggest to you that the book of Revelation is a message from God which shows us 3 important things? Let's write them down. Number 1, letter A, that Jesus has totally defeated the devil. Can you write down defeated the devil? First thing we see is Jesus has totally defeated the devil. It tells us who's winning. It tells us what the score is. It tells us what happened when the forces of Satan take on the forces of God. Here's the answer. Jesus wins. Let me show you the second thing it tells us. That everyone who follows Jesus is on the winning side. Can you write that down? That everyone who follows Jesus is on the winning side. This answers the second question. Have I joined the right group? These Christians that I've signed up with, am I actually on the winning team? And the answer is yes. Because Jesus has won the battle, Christians are on the winning side. And the third thing it answers is this. That we can totally trust God to plan and guide our future. Can you write that down? That we can totally trust God to plan and guide our future. When you look into the book of Revelation, you will see the future that God has planned for you. And you will think, oh my goodness, I really can trust God. Even though right now it looks a bit messy, I can see where God is taking the whole shebang. That's what it's all about. Number 2 on that page, I want to give you 3 clues as to how to understand the book of Revelation. These are fairly simple things, but I think if you understand 3 things tonight, the rest of the book will make a whole lot of sense to you in our coming days. And the first one there, keep your eyes on the time. Now, can I tell you what I mean by that? The world you live in, you can only see the present. You can only see what's around you. Yesterday is only a memory. Tomorrow is only a dream. All you've got is what's now. But you see, the book of Revelation keeps changing where it focuses. And it keeps taking us over 3 different time periods. Sometimes it'll be talking about the past. Sometimes it's talking about the present. And sometimes it's talking about the future. Can you write those 3 words down in those 3 boxes at the top of the diagram? Past, present, and future. It keeps panning from one to the other. And sometimes as you read it, you're not sure, is that talking about something that's already happened? Or is it talking about something which is still in the future? And sometimes not every Christian in the world can agree on exactly when it changes from one to the other, but we can all agree on where it ends up. Now, just to make life more exciting, as well as panning from the past to the present or the future, it will also tilt up and down. And these are the words that go in on the left-hand side. That sometimes it will be talking about God's world up in the heavens. Sometimes it's talking about our world right here on earth. And sometimes it's looking down at a place they like to call under the earth, Satan's world, the world of evil. And just for a moment as we read it, it's like the curtain is being drawn back. And rather than just seeing your world through your eyes right now, you get to see what's happened in the past, you get to see what God is doing now, you get to see what He's doing in the future, and you get to see all that on earth, you get to see it in the heavens, and you get to see it in the world of evil. And it keeps moving around. And sometimes it zooms in really close up, and sometimes it zooms back out and gives you the big picture. And we'll help you follow how it's going. Now, this can get a bit confusing. Now, I love watching football on TV. Now, when you hear the word football, lots of things will go through your mind. But can I just talk about the game I love watching, which is the game of football? It's a round ball is involved in this one. Now, here's what happens sometimes. The opposition team scores a goal against my team on the TV. And I'm feeling a bit dejected, so I deal with that by going to the fridge and getting some snacks. When I come back from what's only been like 60 seconds at the snackmobile, I come back and there's another goal being scored against my team. And I'm thinking, 2 goals in 2 minutes, how did they do that? And then I think, oh my goodness, that's the replay from the other camera angle. And then they show it again. If my pain wasn't enough, then they show it in slow motion. The goal, the goal. And then they show it in close-up. They've got the close camera on the player who actually head the ball, and you can see every drop of sweat coming off, every pore in his forehead as they zoom right in, and they show every bit of sweat coming off him as he heads the ball. And you see the same goal from the distance, from a different angle, the overhead shot, the behind the goal shot, the little camera they put in the corner of the back of the net. You see the same thing about 5 different times from 5 different angles. And the book of Revelation keeps doing that. You'll see something in the present, then you'll see it played again in the past. You see it in the future. You see it in close-up. You see it in the heavens. And sometimes they're looking at the same event and showing it to you from every camera angle that God has put there. So there's my first clue for you. Keep your eyes on the time. Here's a second clue. Keep your eyes on the big picture. This is just over the page at the top. Keep your eyes on the big picture. Now I want you to imagine we've gone on an excursion to an art gallery, and they've got all these weird drawings on the wall which look like nothing on earth, but we're very intelligent. And we're wandering along, and we're seeing these blobs and spaces and saying, oh, I think the artist is expressing his inner turmoil at the consequences of an unfulfilled life. Oh yes, I love the use of shadow. I think it shows his dark side, probably goes back to his childhood. And we're looking at all these abstract pictures which really look like nothing on earth, and we're imagining all the wonderful things that the artist means. And so we come across this little abstract picture and we're thinking, oh, I can see the variations of light. I can see the sadness that lies at the side of his life, but I can see that he's moving forward towards an ultimate future. I love the autumn tonings. It shows the season in the artist's life when the autumn leaves were falling in his heart. And we can analyse this all we want because we're looking at it so close up. But you know, if we just backed off a little bit and went across and saw the picture from a distance, let's have a look. We think, oh, maybe we actually missed the point. Oh my goodness. It's the world's best youth pastor. When you read the book of Revelation, sometimes you'll come across a little picture in one of the verses and you think, I have no idea what that means. Don't worry about it. Does it make sense? There are verses in the book of Revelation and I'm not quite sure what they mean either. And if you ask 10 different theological professors, they would give you 10 different answers. Don't worry about the brush strokes. Keep stepping back and seeing the big picture. And when you step back and you see the big picture, it is crystal clear. If you want the book of Revelation in 2 words, Jesus wins. If you want the book of Revelation in another 2 words, we win. Because if you're a Christian and you're with Jesus, you're on the winning side. So number 1, keep your eye on the time. Number 2, keep your eye on the big picture. And number 3, keep your eye on the numbers. Now, normally in the Bible, when it uses a number to describe something, it just means that many. Like when the kid has 5 loaves and 2 fishes, the 5 just means like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 2 fishes just means, you know, twice as many as having 1 fish. That's all it means. But when you get into apocalyptic writing, numbers are symbolic. And they keep the same symbolic meaning no matter who is writing. So when you see numbers in the book of Revelation, there's a good chance that they are going to be symbolic, not literal. So, can I give you the insider's view on what numbers mean in apocalyptic writing? And if you can understand this, boy, it's going to save you a whole lot of heartache. The number that represents The spirit world is the number 3. So write it down. When you see 3 of something, you think, it's probably talking about the heavenlies or the world of evil. It's probably not the earth, it's probably the spiritual world. Because the number that represents the earth is the number 4. When you see 4 of something, you're thinking, okay, that represents something on earth. Now, if you added 3 and 4 together, the spiritual world plus the earthly world, you get the number for completeness, which is the number 7. And we still use the number 7 to mean like perfect or complete. But if you see 7 of something in the book of Revelation, it's probably talking about a complete number. Now, if you had to think of a number for incomplete, what would you do? What if you halve the number 7? 3.5. Now, my computer's not clever enough to do the half symbol, written it as a decimal. But 3.5 is a number which simply means it's incomplete. The human number is the number 6. You see 6 of something, you think, that's probably talking about humans. So what if you want to talk about God's people, those humans? Well, the number is normally 12. If you see 12 of something, or a multiple of 12, like 12 or 24 or 144, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, that's God's people. Interesting, there were 12 tribes of Israel, and there were 12 apostles for Jesus. And the last one, when you see the number 10, or 100, or 1,000, or a squillion, the round number simply means stacks. Stacks upon stacks upon stacks upon stacks, as many as you can imagine. So, my 3 suggestions for getting the most out of this book. Number 1 is simply keep your eyes on the time. Number 2, keep your eyes on the big picture. Number 3, keep your eyes on the numbers. Can we have a little look at a couple of things in it? Can you open up at chapter 1, and we're going to go to verse number 10. And I want to show you what this message of Jesus is all about. Revelation chapter 1, verse 10. This is John speaking, and he's describing how he got the message. Right, Revelation chapter 1, verse 10. On the Lord's day, I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, write on a scroll what you see, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Now, by the way, they are 7 towns that actually existed, and there was a Christian gathering in each town. And there were actually 7 different letters written to these 7 towns. And by the way, in your hang time with God tomorrow morning, and each morning, you're going to look at each one of those letters and learn stacks of things. But are you already thinking, oh my goodness, 7 churches. 7 meant something, didn't it? Completeness. It's like, here's a letter to the complete church. It's like, here's a letter to every church. Not just the church then, but the church now. This is a letter to the church at ImpaKCt. This is a letter to the church at Crossfire. This is a letter to the church at your D team, your Bible study. This is a letter to the church down the road from us. This is a letter to every church, in every country, in every age. And it is a word from God. So the first thing that you'll learn from the book of Revelation is simply this: listen to God. Because God speaks to John. Now, what would you do if you suddenly heard this booming voice come out of the sky from behind you and tell you to write it down? What would you do? Well, John tells us what he does. Verse 12. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. Now, just press the pause button. You're thinking, hang on, you told us this was going to be easy to understand. What's the 7 lampstands? Well, don't worry. The Bible actually tells you what it means. Jump down to verse 20, the second half of verse 20. Can you see at the end there? The 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. It actually explains this one for you. So he turns around, he sees 7 lampstands, like 7 churches, and among the lampstand was someone dressed like a son of man. Now, before we go any further, have you already got some clues as to who the someone might be? The term son of man is always used of one person in the Bible. Worked it out yet? Let's see a few more. He's dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet and with a golden sash around his chest. It's almost describing what the high priest would wear in the Jewish system. And you're thinking, who is this man? His head, verse 14, and his hair were white like wool, as white as snows, and his eyes were like blazing fire. This is a description like describing God. That's how he is described in the book of Revelation. Verse 15, his feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. This is an almighty, this is an all-powerful person that is walking around. And verse 16, in his right hand he held the 7 stars. Oh, who are the stars? Go back to verse 20. It tells you the 7 stars are the angels or the messengers of the 7 churches. It could just be the leaders of the 7 churches. And this person is holding those leaders in his hand. And out of his mouth came a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance. Now that's what he sees when he turns around. Now can you imagine what that would do to you? You turn around and someone like the Son of Man, dressed in a robe, and his feet and the golden sash, and his hair was like white, and it's white as snow, his eyes are a blazing fire, his feet are like bronze glowing in a furnace, his voice is like the sound of rushing waters, he's holding the leaders of churches in his hand, and out of his mouth there's a sharp double-edged sword, his face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance. This is a picture of Jesus. And throughout the Revelation, you will focus on Jesus. So if the first step in this book is to listen to God, the second one is to focus on Jesus. Now let's just imagine this picture. You suddenly turned around and there is Jesus in all his glory, just like that. Can you see that this Jesus is nothing like our normal picture of Jesus? You know all the Jesus movies where Jesus is just walking around, being so nice to everybody and just sort of drifting around like he's drying his fingernails. This is a mighty, powerful Jesus who has a sword to attack. How does John respond? Verse 17, this is what he says. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. When John is confronted with this message of Jesus, he simply falls down and worship. Now I want you to understand what falling at his feet like dead would look like. Briley, come here, quick. Everyone know Briley? Okay, fall at my feet like you're dead. They're just checking to make sure you're right. Now, I want you to notice how close my feet are to his head. Does it make sense if you fall down at someone's feet like you are dead, you are saying to them, you have total power over me? Does that make sense? You're saying, I am not worthy to even stand in your presence. They are saying, do with me whatever you want. Does that make sense? When you fall down in worship, that's what you are saying. God, you are powerful and I am not. Lord, do anything with my life, anything that you choose. Thank you for helping, Michael. Would you like to stay there for the rest of the message, or would you like to go back to your seat? Okay, can we have a round of applause for Mr. Michael Briley? This week, as you meet Jesus face to face in the book of Revelation, will you fall down at his feet and worship? Because this week, he's got a message for you. He's got a message to change your life. And I want to challenge you as to how you will respond. When you meet up with Jesus in his word this week, will you fall down at his feet? And will you say to him, do with me whatever you want?